Commander Lee Sung pressed his palm against the cold metal of the bridge window. Through the thick glass, he could see what remained of Earth floating in the darkness like broken pieces of a child's toy. Chunks of rock drifted slowly past the ship, some still glowing with heat from the destruction that happened 50 years ago. The silence on the bridge felt heavy. Everyone knew what they were looking at, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. This was home. This pile of debris and dust had once been a blue and green world where billions of people lived and loved and dreamed.
Captain.
Navigator Park Min called softly from her station. Her young face was pale as she stared at her screens. I'm picking up metal readings that match our old building materials, steel and concrete fragments. Nung turned from the window. Park Min was only 25 years old. She had been born on a colony ship, far from Earth, after the attack happened. She had never felt real sunlight on her face, or breathed air that wasn't recycled through machines. Like so many of the younger generation, Earth was just a story to her, but now she was seeing the truth of what they had lost. How much debris are we talking about? Sung asked. Massive amounts, sir. The scanners show pieces scattered across millions of kilometers. Some chunks are as big as small mountains. Park Min's voice shook slightly. There are also traces of organic matter mixed in with the rock. Sung closed his eyes for a moment. Organic matter meant bodies. People who had been caught in the attack, vaporized and scattered with everything else when the hegemony's weapons tore the planet apart. The hegemony had been very clear about their reasons. Humanity was too dangerous, they said, too unpredictable. Humans didn't follow the rules that other species followed. They asked too many questions and refused to accept that some things couldn't be changed. In the ordered galaxy that the 12 alien species had built, there was no place for creatures who thought differently, so they had decided to remove the problem completely. Sir called out Communications Officer Yoon Dae from across the bridge. I'm detecting some kind of signal coming from the sun. Sung looked toward the main screen where their dying star filled the display. The sun looked wrong. Instead of the bright yellow light he remembered from old Earth videos, it burned with a sick orange glow. The aliens had done something to its core, made it unstable. Maybe 100 years, it would collapse completely. What kind of signal? Sung asked. It's very weak. Almost like an echo of old Earth broadcasts. Radio waves bouncing around inside the solar system. Yoon Dae frowned at his instruments. But that's impossible. Any signals from Earth should have died out decades ago. Unless something is still transmitting, Park Min said quietly. The bridge fell silent again. The idea that something might still be working, still broadcasting from the ruins of their world, was both hopeful and terrifying. Sung walked to the captain's chair and sat down heavily. He was 63 years old now, old enough to remember. Earth before the attack. He had been a young officer then, stationed on Mars when the hegemony fleet arrived. He had watched from the red planet as Earth died in fire and light. Run a full scan of the debris field, he ordered. Look for anything that might still be active. Power sources, transmitters, anything. As his crew worked, Song thought about the secret that the hegemony didn't know. Years before their attack, Earth's leaders had seen the warning signs. They knew the aliens were getting nervous about human expansion and human questions about the way the galaxy was run. Launched the seed ships, hundreds of them sent out in secret to distant stars. Each ship carried not just people and supplies, but also something more important: human knowledge, human culture, and human stubbornness. The refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. Captain Park Min called out excitedly, I found something. There's a structure hidden inside one of the larger asteroids. It's definitely human-made, and it's still powered. A survivor shelter? Yoon Dae asked. Maybe, or maybe something else. Park Min's fingers flew over her controls. The power signature is strange, much stronger than what a shelter would need. Sung felt his heart beat faster. After 50 years of running and hiding, after decades of watching the hegemony hunt down human colonies one by one, maybe they had finally found something that could help them fight back. Set course for that asteroid, he commanded, and prepare a boarding party. If there are survivors, we need to get them out. There's something else, He paused, looking out at the ruins of his homeworld. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humans are harder to kill than they thought. The defiant Echo turned slowly in space, its engines pushing it toward the mystery hidden in Earth's grave. Behind them, the dying sun continued to burn with its unnatural light, casting orange shadows across the debris of what had once been humanity's birthplace. But ahead lay possibility. And for humans, possibility was always enough to keep fighting. Dr. 2. Kim Jae wiped the sweat from his forehead as he bent over the mining equipment. The radiation from the nearby pulsar made his skin tingle, but after 20 years of living in this hidden asteroid base, his body had grown used to it. Most alien species would die within hours in this place, but humans were stubborn about staying. Alive in impossible conditions, the asteroid had been nothing but solid rock when he first found it. Now it was home to 3,000 people living in tunnels and chambers he had carved out with his own hands. Children played in corridors lit by stolen alien technology. Engineers worked in workshops filled with machines that mixed human creativity. With equipment taken from a dozen different species, "Dr. Kim," called a voice from behind him. He turned to see his assistant, Lee Bo, running toward him with a worried expression. "Choi Hannah needs you in the communication center right away. She says it's urgent." Kim Jae dropped his tools and followed Lee Bo through the winding passages. The walls were rough stone, but warm air flowed through hidden vents that kept everyone comfortable. Solar panels stolen from a hegemony supply ship provided power, while water came from ice mined from the asteroid's core. The communication center was one of the most important rooms in the base. Banks of equipment lined the walls, some human-made, but most of it alien technology that had been modified and improved. Choi Hannah sat at the main console, her young face tight with concentration as her fingers moved across the control panels. "What's the situation?" Kim Jae asked. "I intercepted a hegemony military transmission 20 minutes ago," Choi Hannah replied without looking up from her screens. "They've found the Centauri settlement. Admiral Vexstar is mobilizing an extermination. Fleet 6 heavy cruisers and 2 planet crackers." Kim Jae felt his blood run cold. The Centauri settlement was home to 8,000 people, including many families with small children. Planet crackers were exactly what they sounded like. Massive ships designed to break worlds apart from orbit. "How long do we have?" he asked. "The fleet launches in 6 days. Transit time to Centauri is for days, so we have 10 days total before they arrive." Kim Jae ran his hands through his gray hair. At 58, he had seen too many settlements destroyed, too many friends killed. The hegemony had been hunting human survivors for decades, tracking them down one by one and wiping them out with cold efficiency. But the aliens had made one big mistake. They thought humans would just hide and wait to die. Instead, every attack had made the survivors stronger. Every destroyed settlement had taught them new lessons about fighting back. "Show me the fleet composition," Kim Jae said. Choi Hannah brought up a detailed display on the main screen. The hegemony ships appeared as red dots moving through space, along with technical specifications for each vessel. Kim Jae studied the information carefully. 6 cruisers meant about 30,000 alien soldiers. The planet crackers carried enough firepower to turn a world into asteroids. "Have you contacted the other settlements?" he asked. "I sent out coded messages to all 46 colonies as soon as I confirmed the transmission," Choi Hannah replied. "Responses are coming in now." The screen filled with status reports from hidden bases across the galaxy. Humans living in the hearts of gas giants, carved into the surfaces of dead moons, hidden in the radiation shadows of dying stars. Each settlement had grown from desperate refugees into something stronger. Communities that had learned to survive in places where survival should be impossible. "What about our fleet?" Kim Jae asked. 23 ships ready for combat," reported Park Soo from the tactical station, "not counting the civilian vessels. Most are hybrid designs using modified alien technology." Kim Jae nodded. The human fleet didn't look like much compared to the massive hegemony warships, but appearances could be deceiving. Human engineers had taken alien technology and improved it in ways the original designers never imagined. Faster engines, stronger shields, weapons that could punch through armor that was supposed to be invincible. "Send a message to all settlement commanders," Kim J ordered. "Run them, we're done running. It's time to show the hegemony what happens. When you try to wipe out a species that refuses to die." Choi Hannah's fingers flew across her console as she sent out the coded transmission. Within minutes, responses began coming back. Settlement after settlement confirmed they were ready to fight. Engineers reported weapon systems coming online. Military leaders shared tactical data. For 50 years, humanity had been scattered and hunted. The hegemony thought they had broken the human spirit, turned them into frightened refugees who would eventually be hunted down and destroyed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Doctor called out Engineer Yoon-tae from across the room. "The new weapons are ready for testing. The plasma cannons we built using hegemony technology are showing 90% efficiency improvement over the original designs." Kim J smiled grimly. That was what humans did best: take something that already worked and make it work better. The hegemony had superior technology, but they had grown comfortable and lazy. They hadn't needed to innovate for centuries. Humans had been forced to innovate every day just to stay alive. "Prepare the fleet," Kim J commanded. "It's time to give the galaxy a reminder that humanity is still here." Colonel Yoon-dae crawled through the narrow metal tunnel, his breathing quiet and controlled. Behind him, 5 other humans moved like shadows through the ventilation system of Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the brain of the hegemony's empire. The air shaft was barely wide enough for a human body, which was exactly why they had chosen this route. "Distance to target," Day whispered into his communication device. 50 meters ahead came the soft reply from Sergeant Oben, who was leading the group. Her scanner glowed dimly in the darkness, showing the layout of the station around them, to guard posts between us and the broadcast center. Day smiled grimly. The hegemony had built their security systems to stop armies and fleets, not small. Groups of humans crawling through spaces too small for most alien species. After decades of studying captured hegemony technology, humans had learned all their weaknesses. The station around them was enormous, stretching 4 kilometers in every direction. Millions of aliens lived and worked here, managing the empire that controlled most of the galaxy. From this place, orders went out to destroy entire worlds, to enslave species that refused to obey, to hunt down the last survivors of races that had been marked for extinction. Movement detected. Oh, been warned. Patrol coming our way. The team froze in the darkness as heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors below them. Through the ventilation grates, Day could see 3 hegemony guards walking past. They were tall, gray-skinned creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes. Their weapons could burn through metal, but they never thought to look up at the ceiling. After the guards passed, the team continued forward. They carried no explosives, no weapons designed to destroy the station. What they carried was far more dangerous than any bomb, a data storage device containing 50 years of carefully gathered evidence. "We're here," Oben whispered. Through the grate below them, Day could see the broadcast center. It was a room full of communication equipment that connected to every world in hegemony space. Messages sent from here could reach billions of beings in minutes. Security scan shows 2 technicians inside, reported Corporal Lee Min from his position at the rear of the group. Both are focused on their screens. Standard shift change happens in 8 minutes. Day checked his watch. They had been planning this mission for 3 years, studying guard rotations, learning the station's schedule, finding the perfect moment to strike. Everything had to happen exactly on time. "Kim Soo, you're up," Day said quietly. Private Kim Soo was the youngest member of the team, barely 22 years old, but she had grown up with alien technology and could operate hegemony systems better than most of their own technicians. Her small hands worked quickly on the grate, removing it without making a sound. One by one, the team dropped into the broadcast center. The 2 alien technicians looked up from their workstations, their compound eyes wide with surprise. Before they could call for help, Oben had stunned them with a captured hegemony weapon set to non-lethal settings. "How long do we have?" Day asked, as Kim Soo connected her equipment to the main communication array. Maybe 20 minutes before someone notices the technicians are unconscious, Oben replied, watching the door. Maybe less if we're unlucky. Kim Su's fingers flew across the alien control panels. The hegemony used quantum encryption for their communications. But human code breakers had spent decades learning to crack it. Within minutes, she had access to the entire galactic communication network. "We're in," she announced. 2. All frequencies in 3.2.1. And what happened next changed the galaxy forever. The message that went out was not a human war cry or a threat of revenge. Instead, it was simply the truth. 50 years of carefully documented evidence about what the hegemony really was and what they had done to countless species across the galaxy. Video. Recordings showed hegemony forces destroying peaceful worlds whose only crime was refusing to join their empire. Audio files contained conversations between hegemony leaders discussing which species to eliminate next. Financial records proved that entire civilizations had been enslaved to provide cheap labor for hegemony projects. The destruction of Earth was just one small part of a much larger pattern. For thousands of years, the hegemony had been wiping out any species that dared to question their authority or think differently about how the galaxy should be run on 1,000 worlds. Beings who had never questioned their government suddenly learned the truth about the empire they lived under. They discovered that friends and neighbors from other species had been quietly disappearing for decades. They learned that their own leaders had sold them to the hegemony in exchange for power and wealth. "Transmission complete," Kim Su reported. "The message has reached every communication network in hegemony space." Already, their scanners were picking up emergency communications from across the galaxy. Riots were breaking out on industrial worlds where enslaved species were rising up against their masters. Military units were refusing orders to attack civilian populations. Entire star systems were declaring independence from hegemony rule. "Time to go, Day," said as alarms began blaring throughout the station. The team moved quickly through corridors that were suddenly filled with panicking aliens. Guards ran past them without a second glance, focused on the reports of rebellion flooding in from every corner of the empire as they reached their escape ship. Day allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The hegemony had tried to erase humanity by destroying their homeworld and hunting down the survivors. But humans had learned something important during their years of hiding. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was not a gun or a bomb, but simply the truth. Admiral Hanso stood in the command center of the battleship Iron Will, watching dozens of red dots appear on the tactical display. Each represented a human fleet emerging from hiding places across the galaxy. For 50 years, these ships had been scattered and hidden, but now they were coming together for the first time since Earth's destruction. Fleet status report. Hanso called out to her bridge crew. 63 ships confirmed operational, replied Navigation Officer Park Jun, including the converted mining vessels and the hybrid fighters. Total crew count is approximately 40,000. Hanso nodded as she studied the numbers. Compared to the massive hegemony navy, 40,000 people didn't seem like much. But these weren't ordinary ships or ordinary crews. Every vessel had been built or modified by humans who had learned to survive in impossible conditions. Had taken alien technology and improved it in ways the original designers never imagined. The ship around was a perfect example. The Iron Will had started life as a hegemony cargo hauler that had been captured during a raid 5 years ago. Human engineers had stripped out the original systems and rebuilt everything from scratch. The engines were twice as fast as the original design. Weapons could punch through armor that was supposed to be invincible. The shields could absorb energy that would have destroyed the original ship. Admiral called communications officer Lim Kong from his station. "I'm receiving a message from the Thalorian fleet. They're requesting permission to join our formation." Hanso felt a surge of satisfaction. The Thalorians were one of the species that the hegemony had conquered centuries ago. Their homeworld had been turned into a mining colony, their people forced to work in dangerous conditions for barely enough food to survive. But the broadcast 3 days ago had changed everything. "Tell the Thalorians they are welcome to fight alongside us," Hanso replied. Assign them to the 3rd Attack Group under Captain Kim Do. More reports came in from across the galaxy. Zelrani had seized control of their orbital stations. The Makti were in open rebellion against their hegemony governors. 3 entire star systems had declared independence and were forming their own defense fleets. Admiral reported Tactical Officer Yunha. Long-range sensors show a hegemony battle group approaching from the Vega sector. 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. Hanso studied the tactical display as the enemy ships appeared as bright red symbols moving toward their position. Hegemony Dreadnought alone was 3 times the size of her entire fleet. Its weapons could destroy planets, and its shields could absorb the combined firepower of dozens of smaller ships. "What's our weapon status?" she asked. "All ships report ready for combat," Yunha replied. "The new plasma cannons are showing full power. The shield harmonics are synchronized across the fleet." Hanso smiled grimly. The shield harmonics were a human innovation that no alien species had ever thought of. By synchronizing the defensive screens of multiple ships, they could create a single, much stronger barrier that could protect the entire fleet. It was the kind of creative thinking that came from years of fighting against impossible odds. "Signal. All ships," Hanso commanded. "Attack formation, Beta 7. We're going to show the hegemony what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity." The human fleet moved forward in a pattern that would have confused any traditional military commander. Instead of forming neat lines like most space navies, the ships scattered in what looked like random directions. But there was a careful plan behind the chaos. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. The hegemony Dreadnought opened fire first, its massive weapons sending beams of energy across space, but the human ships were no longer where the alien gunners expected them to be. They darted and weaved like insects, too small and fast for the big guns to track. "First wave, engage," Hanso ordered. The converted mining ships loaded with explosives and piloted by volunteers raced toward the enemy formation. The hegemony cruisers focused their fire on these obvious targets exactly as the humans had planned. While the alien gunners were distracted, the real attack came from unexpected directions. Human fighters, built with stolen technology and powered by desperation, swarmed over the hegemony ships like angry wasps. Their weapons were small, but they had been designed to find and exploit every weakness in alien armor. Explosions began to blossom along the hulls of ships that were supposed to be indestructible. "Direct hit on the lead cruiser," reported Yunha excitedly. "Their main reactor is showing instability." The battle raged for 3 hours. One by one, the mighty hegemony warships began to fail. Their crews had grown comfortable after centuries of easy victories against helpless enemies. They had never faced opponents who fought with the creativity and determination that came from having nothing left to lose. When it was over, 12 hegemony cruisers were either destroyed or drifting powerless in space. The great dreadnought, pride of the alien fleet, was a broken hulk leaking atmosphere and radiation. "Casualties?" Hanso asked quietly. 11 ships lost, Park Jun reported. "But we saved over 30,000 lives from the crews." Hanso nodded. Every human life was precious now, but they had proven something important today. They had shown the galaxy that the hegemony could be beaten. That the species that had ruled through fear and oppression for so long were not invincible. "Signal the fleet commanders," she ordered. "Tell them to prepare for the next phase. We're going to liberate every world, free every enslaved species, and make sure that no one ever again has to live under the boot of tyranny." The tide had turned. The galaxy's oppressors were about to learn that some species refused to stay buried. Lee Sung stood at the wide window of the memorial station, her hands resting on the metal railing. At 93 years old, her hair was completely white, and her face was lined with wrinkles. But her eyes were still sharp and clear. Through the thick glass, she could see the stars scattered across the darkness like tiny diamonds. 50 years had passed since the end of the Great War. 50 years since the last hegemony fleet had surrendered, and their empire had finally collapsed. The galaxy was a very different place now, and Lee Sung had lived long enough to see it all change. "Admiral," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Park Soo walking across the observation deck. He was 78 years old now, his once black hair silver and his back slightly bent. But he still wore his uniform with pride, and he still called her by her old military rank even though the war was long over. "The report from New Geneva Colony just came in," Park Soo said, holding a data tablet in his weathered hands. "Construction is complete. The first families have already moved into their new homes." Lee Sung smiled. "That makes 47 worlds now." 47 worlds liberated and rebuilt, Park Soo agreed. 47 places where families can live free from fear. Sung looked back out at the stars. Each point of light in the darkness represented something different now than it had during the war. Then each star had been either an enemy stronghold or a potential hiding place. Now they were homes where different species lived together in peace. The memorial station where they stood had been built in the exact spot where Earth used to orbit around the sun. The planet itself was gone forever, turned to dust and scattered rocks by hegemony weapons a century ago. But in its place, humans had built something that would last even longer than their homeworld had. The station was enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction. Inside its halls and chambers, visitors could learn about Earth's history, about the war that followed its destruction, and about the peace that had been built afterward. Children from dozens of different species came here on school trips to learn about the importance of freedom and the price of oppression. "Do you ever think about what Earth would look like now if they hadn't destroyed it?" Park Soo asked quietly. Lee Sung considered the question. "Sometimes. But I think what we built instead might be better than what we lost. Earth was just one world. Now we have 47 worlds, and more being settled every year." Through the window, she could see the navigation beacons that marked safe travel. Routes through this part of space? The beacons flashed in carefully timed patterns, and if you knew how to read them, they spelled out messages in dozens of different languages. "Never again" pulsed in bright blue letters. "Freedom eternal" glowed in soft green. "Remember the fallen" flashed in solemn red. The messages weren't just for humans. They were for every species in the galaxy, a reminder of what had happened, and a promise that it would never happen again. "What about the hegemony survivors?" Park Soo asked. "The latest reports say they're doing well in the Outer Rim territories." Lee Sung nodded. After the war ended, humanity had faced a difficult choice. They could have taken revenge on the species that had destroyed Earth and hunted human survivors for decades. Many people had wanted to do exactly that, to make the aliens pay for what they had done. But in the end, humanity had chosen a different path. The hegemony leaders who had ordered the destruction of Earth were put on trial and punished. But the ordinary citizens, the soldiers who had just been following orders, the workers who had just been trying to survive, they were given a chance to start over. The former hegemony species now lived in the galaxy's outer regions, territories that humans had helped them settle. They had their own governments, their own laws, their own cultures. The only requirement was that they could never again build the kind of military force that could threaten other species. They send representatives to the Galactic Council meetings. Now, Lee Sung said, their voices are heard along with everyone else's. Some of them have even become friends with human colonies. It had taken decades, but slowly the wounds of war had begun to heal. The galaxy was still divided into many different governments and alliances, but they all followed the same basic rules. No species could be enslaved, no world could be destroyed, simply because its people thought differently, and every being had the right to live free from fear. Admiral Park Soo said softly, "Do you think we did the right thing, showing mercy instead of taking revenge?" Lee Sung looked at her old friend and comrade. They had both seen terrible things during the war, had lost friends and family members. They had watched entire human settlements be wiped out by alien weapons. It would have been easy to let hatred consume them. "Look out there," she said, pointing at the stars. "Every one of those lights represents billions of beings living in freedom, children playing safely in their homes, artists creating beautiful things, scientists making discoveries that help everyone. Yes, that's what we fought for, and that's what we achieved." The navigation beacons continued their eternal message, flashing their warnings and promises across the darkness. The scars that humanity had carved across the galaxy would shine forever, ensuring that future generations would remember both the price of oppression and the value of freedom.